Hello guys, welcome back. Now I'm going to be trying to answer the question, can Connor McDavid in his career win a Stanley Cup with the Edmonton Oilers? Now Connor McDavid in the last couple of years has proved himself to be the premier offensive player in the league, if not the best player in general in the league. And if you ask around the league to different players, they'll say that the best player is Connor McDavid, and that's the general opinion right now. Now, a couple of days ago, Crosby was asked who the best player in the world was. He didn't say himself, he didn't say another random player, he said Connor McDavid, and I think that speaks volumes. Even though he had to have said an answer there, I think that obviously Sidney Crosby in the last decade has been the best NHL player, but Connor McDavid has passed him in the last couple of years, and I think he's starting to get widely recognized as the best player in the NHL. I don't think there's really anything arguing against that. Now, in the last 3 years since Connor McDavid has come into the league, I think he's a top 5 scorer at least. Of course, the back-to-back Art Ross trophies, 2-timed Art Ross trophies when he came into the league definitely helps that. But again, as an 18-year-old coming into the league, then a 19-year-old, then a 20-year-old, he's super young, and still we haven't seen his prime yet. So currently, Connor McDavid isn't in his prime yet, and we're yet to see the best of him. So while the hype is definitely deserved, and while he is definitely getting that recognition now as the best player in the NHL, he could be even better than he is right now. Offensively, I think he has even more potential than what he's shown so far. It's just all about for the Edmonton Oilers getting those teammates around him, and right now, of course, he's secured as the best player in the world, and he's going to get even better, at least when it comes to points in the next few years. But of course, when you have giant expectations, there is giant responsibility, and Connor McDavid has already had to deal with that in the last few years, of course, getting the captaincy at a very young age. He's already got that responsibility pretty early, and so far I think he's handled it decently, but there still is improvements to be made. Now, so far that when I'm recording this, the Edmonton Oilers are at a 3-2 record on the season, so far it's been working, and Connor McDavid has had an electric season so far. But Connor McDavid, since he came into the league, had expectations to lead the Edmonton Oilers not just to a playoff berth, not just to the second round, not just to the third round, but to the Stanley Cup final and ultimately to win it. He's obviously got that aspirations, and if he's, for some people, if he's going to become the best player in the world, he has to get that cup. While I think that's a little bit unfair, there is always going to be that stigma until he gets it. And with the Edmonton Oilers, while it'll be pretty hard, it'll be a definite challenge to get them there, I feel like Connor McDavid obviously can carry a team, and he's shown that, of course, a couple of years ago. Whether it's fair or not, he has definite expectations to be a Stanley Cup winner in his career. He has definite expectations to at least get to the ball game once. And for Edmonton, they're not in the greatest position to win, and we've seen that in the last couple of years, but Connor McDavid, he is the best player in the world, so he's going to have that expectations. Whether it's fair or not, he's going to have that expectations to win, and win big. In the last year, it's been pretty rough for the Edmonton Oilers, of course, with that Taylor Hall trade. It ended up biting them in the butt. Taylor Hall winning the MVP with the New Jersey Devils, and of course that Milan Lucic contract they signed 2 years ago is obviously not looking the greatest. So some moves that ultimately went to their demise last season could factor into this season. Now, I'm not justifying that Taylor Hall trade because I don't think you can do that any way possible, but for the Edmonton Oilers, I feel like they still have a decent future, and if they make some changes, if they make some improvements, I can see this team making the playoffs and possibly getting pretty far. Now, do I see the Edmonton Oilers as a Stanley Cup contender? Not anytime soon. But do I do see them as a playoff team next couple of years? Probably. But if they're going to get to there, if they're going to want to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs, they're going to have to make some things, and some things are going to need to change. Now, the biggest concern for me is that goaltending situation. Now, I really like Cam Talbot, and I think he has potential to be a very good starter. But at age 31, he's a UFA after this season. There are some concerns about him lasting, really. And for the Edmonton Oilers in the next few years, if they want to be a contender, they're going to need consistent and very good goaltending, which for Cam Talbot, he has shown that he can bring that. But if he has to be relied on at age 33, at age 34, it might not be the best for him or the Edmonton Oilers. So that goaltending situation might have to be improved, whether it's through free agency or through prospects. They're going to have to find another goaltender after Cam Talbot, which will likely be still with Connor McDavid and the whole team there. For Cam Talbot, he's getting up there in age, so again, I have some concerns with that. And when it comes to that defense, I think there's two parts of it. You got the youth side of that defense, which I think is very solid, but then you got the old side of that defense, which has shown to be not the greatest. Now, Oscar Klefbom and Alan Larson are apparently the same age at age 25, but Larson plays like an older defenseman, so I'll group him in the older defensive category, while I think Klefbom plays like a younger defenseman. He's a lot more agile, so I'll put Klefbom in the younger side. For the younger side, you also got Darnell Nurse, who I think is very good as well. I got Evan Bouchard, who might stay with the team. We'll see. He hasn't played the greatest, though, in his few games that he's played. On the older side, though, you also got a guy like Chris Russell, who is Chris Russell, and is getting heavily overpaid. And you also got Jason Garrison, who is Jason Garrison. Now, with the forward group, I think it's very, very interesting. I think it has potential to be pretty decent. Of course, you got Connor McDavid, who is Connor McDavid, as we're talking about in this video. And you got Leon Draisaitl also in there. You got Milan Lucic, who could have a better season this season. We'll see from them. And Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who is very, very good as well. Overall, there's some solid depth guys as well, and some solid youth, most namely Yamamoto and Puljujarvi, who could factor in even this season the Edmonton Oilers and bring a lot of much-needed youth and talent to the team. But when I look at this team, I see a playoff team, maybe a couple years throughout McDavid's career, but I do not see a team that can really go far into the playoffs and really challenge for a Stanley Cup. Unless Connor McDavid really turns into literally a human god on the ice, which he is most of the time, but in the playoffs, he has to be a literal god for Edmonton to really go anywhere, especially in the playoffs where I think they might get boasted by better opponents there. Right now, I just see this team on paper as not a team that can really compete in the playoffs. That could change in the next couple of years, but I think they're going to need to make some changes for that. I think the forwards are good enough to be a solid threat in the playoffs. I think the goaltending is decent. I think Cam Talbot can be a very serviceable playoff goaltender, but it really comes down to that defense, that penalty kill, and special teams. It's not the greatest there, and the defense, I think, is the biggest issue there for Edmonton, at least right now. I feel like they'll need to add a couple of pieces, and maybe in the offseason, maybe through trades. Again, Peter Chiarelli making a trade for the defenseman is not always the greatest idea, but they're going to need to make at least a couple of moves to really bolster this defense, really bolster this roster, because right now, I just don't feel like it's good enough. This team really is not that much different from the team that competed in the playoffs and I think went to the second round 2 years ago. It isn't that much different, but I don't know if they're going to rekindle that fire that they had 2 years ago where McDavid was a beast. They had some nice, solid depth scoring, but they'll kind of have to recoup that. They're going to have to recoup that magic that they had 2 years ago to really make a run for it. In the next couple of years, I feel like they could have the team to do it, but it's going to take some magic that the team might not replicate again. If Connor McDavid really wants to get a cup with the Edmonton Oilers in the next few years, they're going to need to get the depth scoring that they did a couple years ago, and they're going to need to get the goaltending that they got 2 years ago. Cam Talbot needs to be a lot better than he was last year. He needs to be a lot more consistent than he was last year, and if they can get some backup goaltending, that would be really nice from Mikko Koskinen. And from that forward group, they really were fantastic in the playoffs 2 years ago. They got a lot of depth scoring. Leon Draisaitl was a beast, and he definitely needs to step up. Guys like Lucic and Draisaitl really need to step up, not for the regular season, but also for the playoffs. If Edmonton gets that depth scoring, if they get that goaltending, I feel like they could be a pretty decent team. And of course, if McDavid keeps being a god, I feel like they have a solid chance. Now with this team, I think the max right now is maybe a second round playoff or maybe a conference final if all things go right. But Edmonton really needs to rely on guys like Cam Talbot to really step up. And for Connor McDavid, he needs to play fantastic. He wasn't great 2 years ago. He was still very good, but he wasn't amazing 2 years ago in the playoffs. He needs to be a lot better in the playoffs as well. He needs to really carry that team if they want to have hopes of making the final, if they want to win the Stanley Cup. Connor McDavid needs to be like he was in the regular season and just score points at will. And I feel like he can do that, but in the playoffs, he needs to show that he can do that. Now, another big question is Todd McLellan the coach to be able to bring Edmonton back to the promised land? Again, he was the coach 2 years ago when they made the second round. It looked like a great gel. It looked like the team was really gelling around him, and it looked like a great, fantastic team that was really fixated around his system. But last year, it really did fall apart. It wasn't the same, and it just wasn't the same as it was 2 years ago. Now, this season so far has been decent, but Todd McLellan definitely has questions on whether he can get back to the playoffs, get back with this team, and ultimately get them to the greatness that they haven't been expecting to get with Connor McDavid in the lineup. After the Oilers got defeated by the Anaheim Ducks 2 years ago, the Oilers were looking like a playoff contender. They were looking like a Stanley Cup contender the next year. I saw articles, I saw news networks putting Edmonton as a Stanley Cup final team. I put them as a Stanley Cup final team that year, and maybe a Stanley Cup winning team. A lot of people had that hype around him, and it's pretty much the same team as it was 2 years ago. I think that team has potential. I feel like this team has potential to not just get back to the playoffs, but if all things go right, I feel like they can definitely be a team to compete in those playoffs. Now, Connor McDavid said it himself, I think this past offseason, that last season of the Edmonton Oilers, when they were down the dumpster, it was really a learning experience for Connor McDavid to really get a lot better, not with just how he plays, but also how he leads in the locker room and how being a captain really works. Again, he doesn't have the most experience with that. He's only been a captain for a couple of years now, but he's starting to learn how to do that. He's starting to learn how to be more mature, and of course, he's still a pretty young guy, and he's starting to learn the ropes a lot more, which will ultimately be very, very good for Edmonton in the future. Now, of course, going back to the question at hand, going back to the question of this video, can Connor McDavid win a Stanley Cup in Edmonton? And I'm going kind of back and forth on this, whether I should say yes, whether I should say no, because I can see both happening. I can see the Edmonton Oilers not being able to get back to the Stanley Cup final, not being able to even get back to round 2, even though Connor McDavid might be a beast, they might not be able to do it. But on the other hand, I could see things going right for them. On the other hand, I see the youth could potentially mix in very, very well. I see a goaltending getting back to a much better place with Cam Talbot. I see the offense gelling a lot better than they did last season. Hopefully some guys returning to their former glory. And in some cases, I do see Edmonton getting a lot better. I do see them being a playoff team for a few years there, especially for Edmonton and Connor McDavid's run. But on the other hand, I do have some concerns with the team, especially that defense and some of those older guys, how they'll still keep performing in the next few years while that core ultimately ages a little bit. Now, here is my final answer. You guys aren't going to like this, but I'm going to say that the Edmonton Oilers will win the Stanley Cup with Connor McDavid, and here's my reasoning. I feel like some of those younger guys will finally start to gel a little bit more in the next few years, namely Keller Yamamoto, namely Jesse Puljujarvi, Darnell Nurse will take that another next step. I feel like some of those young guys will really pull through the ranks and will really get into top spots with the Edmonton Oilers, which will ultimately lead them to a faster team and into a better team. I also have a lot more faith in Cam Talbot being a very good starter for years to come, and while I do have some concerns about his age and how consistent he'll be, I do like Cam Talbot a lot, and I feel like he has potential to be a very good playoff goalie, and he's already shown that 2 years ago. There are some question marks with that defense, but if Adam Larsson takes a big step, if he plays a lot better, if Oscar Klefbom becomes even better, that'd be fantastic for Edmonton. If Darnell Nurse can take another next step in his development, that'd be great. If Chris Russell can stop being so terrible, that would be great for Edmonton. Honestly, I'm not going to give too much excuse for that defense because it is pretty average at best, but if they can make maybe a couple moves to bolster that, and if Evan Bouchard becomes a solid guy that they pegged him as, Edmonton's defense could be a little bit better than I think it is and what you think it is. And again, I see a lot of potential in that forward group. As I said before, Keller Yamamoto and Jesse Puljujarvi, I see having big impacts on the team in the next few years and big impacts on the team in general. I feel like they have a lot of potential with some of your younger guys and some of the older guys as well. I feel like Milan Lucic can be a lot better with the team. I feel like some of those older guys will chip in a little bit better throughout the depth there. And some of their guys like Leon Draisaitl, who were a little bit disappointing last year, I feel like will be a little bit better. And of course, they got Connor McDavid at the top, who will be even better offensively in the next few years and likely even better in the playoffs. So yes, while you may be thinking a little bit crazy right here, I do see a lot of things going right for Edmonton in the next few years. Whether Peter Chiarelli messes it all up, we'll see. But for right now, the team on paper, if some of these guys grow, if they make a couple of moves on that defense, a couple of good moves on that defense, I feel like Edmonton could be a very, very solid team, maybe a cup contender for a couple of years there. Again, I feel like it'll be pretty close there, and it could go either way, whether I say yes or no. But I do feel like the Edmonton Oilers will win a cup in Connor McDavid's time there. Now, the Edmonton Oilers are my top 10 favorite teams. I do like them quite a bit, so I definitely want to see the Edmonton Oilers have success. I definitely want to see them win a Stanley Cup in the next 10 years. And with Connor McDavid, they certainly have a big chance to do so. And I want to see Connor McDavid hoist that Stanley Cup because I think he's already deserved that. I feel like he's building towards getting to that point. It'll be great to see Connor McDavid hoist the cup, and that'll be great to see the Edmonton Oilers get back to their former glory. And yes, while I know it'll be a hot take to predict Edmonton to win the Stanley Cup with Connor McDavid in their roster, I feel like in the next 5 years, there'll be a definite a lot of chances for them. I mean, Connor McDavid being in his prime, you're going to want to win the Stanley Cup in that time. And for Edmonton and Connor McDavid, they're both improving. I feel like it's going to get a little bit better for them. And ultimately, I feel like some of those young guys and some things will go right to where Edmonton might just do so. Now, I'm going to not guaranteeing that they'll win the Stanley Cup. I'm kind of iffy. I'm kind of 50-50, but I'm going to lean towards them winning the Stanley Cup. Now, I know this video will be pretty polarizing, whether you think Edmonton will win the Stanley Cup or not. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about the video and my take on the Edmonton Oilers and my take that they'll win the Stanley Cup with Connor McDavid? And of course, what is your opinion? Do you think they'll win the Stanley Cup with Connor McDavid, or they'll ultimately fail to bring Connor McDavid, the best player in the world, a Stanley Cup during his time there? But that's what for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe. Again, tell me down below your thoughts on the video and your opinions on if Edmonton can win the Stanley Cup with Connor McDavid. I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.